So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who's going to talk about a simple participatory tool to assess community flood resilience. His name is Colin McQuistan, and he is with Practical Action, where he's the head of climate and resilience. And he has worked extensively on issues related to poverty dimensions of sustainable development, disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and loss and damage. So his main areas of interest are in system approaches, complexity, resilience, and responding to the challenge of climate change. He's also the co-chair of the Bond Resilience Learning Group, which is a collaborative NGO platform that promotes learning and understanding of resilience. And he's also on the steering committee of the Bond Development and Environment Group. And I will tell you more about the other speakers in turn after Colin's presentation. And that is my introduction.
Thank you very much, Anna. I can just put my presentation up. I'll be ready to go. Right. Share screen. Can I just check you can all see my presentation? Thumbs up? Yes. Great. Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I think I should clarify one thing. This isn't a simple tool, but I will be sharing with you over the next 15 minutes the work that we've been doing as part of the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance. And the aim of that work is to develop a tool to help us understand what are the practical activities that communities, particularly on the front line of flood impact, what they can do to better prepare for future flood events. The Alliance is an alliance of 9 organisations. There are 5 practitioner organisations, of which Practical Action is one. Practical Action, Concern, Mercy Corps, the International Federation of the Red Cross, and Plan International. Then we've got 3 research partners, the International Institute of Applied Systems and Analysis, IASA, which is based in Austria, ICET International, which is based in Boulder in the US, and the London School of Economics. And then supporting this whole alliance is the Zurich Insurance Company. The Z Zurich Foundation finances the program, and Zurich Insurance Company itself actually provides risk engineering inputs into the program. And we're working around the world in both developed and developing countries. And we're working at the community level, and we're particularly looking at communities that are flood vulnerable. And the majority of those communities are flood vulnerable to riverine flooding, but we've also got communities that are susceptible to surface flooding and also coastal flooding events. And as you can see, we've got a good distribution between developed and developing countries across that hazard profile. So the challenge for Practical Action, we're a UK-based civil society organisation. We've been working on development issues since the mid-1960s, and we have a global programme on climate and resilience, very much built around hydrometeorological hazards, which we're seeing increase as climate change takes hold, and in particular a focus on flooding. We've worked in the past a lot around technology, so the role particularly of early warning systems and forecasting in developing appropriate responses to floods has been a large part of our programs. So these are just some photographs from our programs around the world. And as you can see, the communities that we're working in next to rivers, on coasts, they are facing increasing floods. And the graph there is really just to indicate that this is getting more severe, more intense, and happening more frequently. And many of the communities that we're working with are demonstrating the point at which they are struggling to progress because of the repetition and the impacts of those flood events. So we've been thinking what it is we need to do to better help those communities be prepared and respond to this changing conditions. and hence our participation in the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance. Now, one of the first things that we face when we go into communities is, I think it's twofold. First of all, communities on the front lines of climate change have numerous challenges that they're trying to struggle with. They've got issues around education, around health, around infrastructure. But we're going into those communities very much with our expertise around resilience building and around the roles that risk reduction can play in improving the livelihoods and well-being of those communities. So we started out with the Alliance and with our work around the world to think about what it is that we can do to help those communities better identify what they can do to build their resilience. Are there activities, are there aspects of their livelihoods or well-being which either place them, increase their exposure to floods, increase their vulnerability to floods, or are there things that they could do which would reduce that exposure or vulnerability? And I think overall we recognise that in many of the communities where we're working, and as part of the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance, we're currently working in Peru, in Bangladesh and in Nepal, and we're hoping to expand our work to Africa to work in Senegal and Zimbabwe, and we're going to extend our program from Peru into our country office in Bolivia to bring in new flood scenarios. But we were very interested in trying to understand across that diversity of different types of community experience and the varying flood hazards that I've mentioned, what does resilience look like and how can we help communities with their existing resources plan better? So this alliance started out in 2013, and one of the first challenges we worked collaboratively on was to try and develop a resilience measurement framework. And this resilience measurement framework, we recognised, needs to be built on existing good practice in terms of community development. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We didn't want to recreate a new structure. We wanted to very much build this into existing good practice from a community programming perspective. We also, with our research partners, recognised that we wanted something that really helps to analyse the challenges that those communities are facing, and something that would then support impact assessment, and also, are we delivering the outcomes that we really wanted to deliver? And then finally, and one of the most important aspects of this work is it's not just about improving the situation for community X on that river, but it's generating that wealth of empirical evidence that we can then use to shift local government, national government, and global policies around resilience, flood resilience, climate resilience. So after a number of brainstorm meetings where the partners came together, we shared our expertise of what we were currently working on in regards to resilience building. We came up with a framework that is built on the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework, which has been around since the mid-1990s, building on the 5 capitals: human capital, social capital, natural capital, and then physical capital and financial capital. And we've recognized that those capitals are sort of the underpinning foundations of communities' well-being and communities' livelihoods. But we also realized, and a lot of the global debate around resilience was focusing on things like absorptive capacity and adaptive capacity and transformative capacity. So we're not looking at those 5 capitals as whether they're present or not present, but whether those capitals are the sources of resilience or the weaknesses in regards to the resilience of that community. So what we're using is the 4R framework, which is an established framework for infrastructure resilience that looks at robustness, the ability to withstand the shock; redundancy, whether you've got functional diversity within your community; resourcefulness, the ability to mobilize when threatened or when needed; and then rapidity, how fast can things be moved around, how fast can assets and resources come to play. And using risk engineering expertise from Zurich, we're using a risk assessment methodology. So we're building our 44 sources of resilience on the capitals, on how they perform during a flood event. And then we're doing that measurement at the beginning of the project period. and then repeating it to get a snapshot of where the resilience of that community is over time. But most importantly, we've also got a post-flood measure that doesn't measure the sources of resilience, but measures whether those sources actually delivered what we thought they would deliver when we did the primary assessment. Now, one of the challenges that we faced right from the beginning was with the 5 capitals, communities are probably quite happy talking about maybe human capacity or social capital. But when you get into financial capital and natural capital, you often don't have the expertise necessary at the community level to be able to unpack what it is about ecosystem services or what it is about financial services that are either strengths or weaknesses. And equally, if you go to an academic, you'll get maybe an overview of what the basin integrity is in that area, or what the financial assets that communities might be able to access are in that area. But very rarely do you bring the two together. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to develop a tool that works across both the practitioner, the research, the expert environments. So what we've done is we've developed an online tool. And there are 2 sides to that online tool. There's a data collection methodology, which is we use smartphones and tablets to actually go out into communities to collect the information on the sources of resilience for those communities based upon a standardized framework of 44 sources of resilience spread across the 5 capitals and the 4 R's. But then what we do after we've collected that data, and we collect it using a variety of different sources, including household interviews, including focus group discussions, including key informant interviews, but also recognizing that a lot of this data might already be available in secondary materials. And so we're extracting data where available. We're of course trying to collect data from multiple sources for each source so that we're not so that we can triangulate between the two and to see whether there is harmony or discord within the sources themselves. And we're then using that information to then rank the sources based upon a risk engineering framework from A to D, where A is best practice, D is significantly below practice, and using the communities, the local experts to help us with both that measurement of the sources and development of the gradings. And then the data is output in the form of tables, a variety of different platforms. We've got a very interactive dashboard that allows people to interrogate that data from a variety of different perspectives. And this is just an example of the data collection exercises in the field. So using handheld data, it prompts you with the questions. There's a glossary contained within it in local languages that helps people to understand, maybe if somebody asks a question, what do you mean by an insurance product, or what do you mean by physical infrastructure? It has that information there readily available to hand so that the questioner can access that information, or they can share that with the person they're interviewing to help to really get some common understanding around what we're seeing as the sources of resilience. That data then, of course, is collected using informal interviews. We've got focus groups, we play games and use that as a way to capture more data, a variety of different methods, but then it's all brought together. Of course, the organizations have very different ways of working. The Red Cross, when they go into communities, they are very formal. They operate through their district structures. Practical action and concern, probably more on the ground, engaging with the communities directly. But we're testing this tool across those different types of operating environments. And then, of course, what's most important is not what we're capturing from the community, but taking it back to the community so that they can actually start to plan for it. So this is a community meeting in Nepal where data has been collected maybe 3 or 4 weeks earlier. It has been processed using the local project field staff, maybe some key informants from the communities and local national experts. And there you can see the data being presented. And I've just done a little screenshot of the types of ways that the data can be presented. And here is just a simple bar chart with green A being green, red being D, to give the community an insight into how they compare on a particular source across the different capitals. And it really is a way to help the community to try and understand what resilience looks like and where they can work, where they can't work, and what they need to do. Some of the outcomes of this process have been improvements in response measures, so training up disaster risk management or flood response units in communities so that communities have that access to the relief operations they need. Sometimes it's working with women's group to actually build maybe their capacity, their literacy, so that they can access financial services. It's about improving early warning systems. It's also about improving infrastructure. And the case on the right-hand side is a simple evacuation route from a school across a canal using a bamboo platform, so that when the flood siren goes, they know where to go when that message comes. We've also worked on developing infrastructure. So on the right-hand side, this is a flood shelter from one of our communities in Nepal. On the left-hand side, it's more about influencing national governments. And this is some work that we did with Tsunami, which is the Department of Hydrology and Meteorology in Peru, to actually influence their budget for 2020-2021 to increase the amount of funding that's going into early warning systems. Because we've recognized with communities throughout Peru that one of the issues is there's a lack of access to early warning information. We've also used the evidence from our work to develop policy pieces and research papers. This is at what costs, which is highlighting one of the things that we've learned. There is an inadequate amount of investment going into resilience building at the front line, and what funding is going through climate funding or DRR funding is failing to reach people on the front lines. The middle one, again, is increasing this access of early warning systems in Peru. And on the right-hand side is my colleague from Nepal speaking at a UN climate conference to highlight the work that we've been doing and some of the lessons from our community programs and why we need to focus on loss and damage and increase investment in adaptation. We've also developed a very simple post-event review assessment methodology, which can be used post-flood to look at what worked and what didn't work, and how can that be used to inform local governments, national governments, and global policy on better preparedness, better response measures when floods happen. We've also got an online portal where all of the tools and all of the information that I've shared today is available. And we also are developing local language portals in Latin America, in Spanish, in Nepal, in Nepalese, in Bangladesh, in Bengali, and also in West Africa in French, to disseminate this information to wider audiences. And finally, we're really interested in other people taking up this methodology. Everything has been developed, it's ready to go. And if you're interested, you can go onto our portal and download the Inviting Others document, which includes a form to then fill in to express your interest in piloting the tool, or maybe helping us understand from a research perspective what we're getting from the program. And I've also included in the presentation a set of links to other materials, and I'm hoping this will be available after the call for people to share. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to answering your questions at the end of today. Thank you very much.